Good morning. We're going to start off today, of course, with a quote by Thomas Carlyle. And he says, "Silence is the element in which great things fashion themselves together." Silence is the element in which great things fashion themselves together. And being quiet, whether it's just with your words or being silent with your thoughts, is where a lot of things come into clarity. Meditating, I think, is maybe one of the modern words for this, kind of this silence. But when we're able to kind of silence ourselves, then we get a little bit of clarity. I know that over the past couple of months, there has been a lot of uncertainty in my life, and I'm sure in yours as well. And taking a moment to get into a meditative state helps with a little bit of clarity, to silence the thoughts and silence and maybe just be quiet, not always have the answer, not always have a response, but just be silence. I think many of us certainly with what happened with George Floyd and then the subsequent protests, but people really being concerned about the future of our country and the future of where we're going, instead of really needing to have a response. One of the most important conversations that I had with friends over the course of the past several African American friends, people of color, these kinds of things, was just being silent so that we can have a moment to really clearly get an understanding. And I thought that that was really good conversations that I had, and being able to be silent, being able to, I think the fancy word for it is meditate, but really see with clarity. And it's very hard to see with clarity when coming from a very emotional state. And we all, at least with COVID, and we all with everything going on, the start of school, there is a lot of chatter, internal chatter, and to silence that, to get clarity, so that we can form a way in which to live, a form in which a way in which to go in the world, is so important. And so that's what I've been working on, is really kind of understanding what Thomas Carlyle is saying, is that that's where things really are solved, is in the silence, and being able to hear within the silence. And many of us have seen that. Sometimes just a good night's sleep. They say sleep on any major decision. When you have a big decision, it can be very, very confusing and loud. And sometimes, if you just sleep on it, there's clarity in the next day, in that silence of the great silence of, of course, sleep. And so we'll just some thoughts on that reading, or in that meditation. So we are in Pirkei Avot, um, and we are in chapter 5, and we're talking about characteristics of people. We're talking about different ways in which people present themselves. And like I said, that these, I believe, are all aspects of our own being. And we ended up with those who enter in the house of study, meaning that they go into the Beit Midrash, they go into the house of study. And now we're moving on to, there are four types among those who sit before the sages. Sorry. So the Chochamim, or the sages, are those and those in Israel, or those Jewish thinkers, the rabbis, so to speak, the ancient rabbis. And there are four among those who sit before the sages. And the way I kind of look at it is that these are our mentors. These are people who guide us. These are people who to take a moment and think about who your mentors are in this world, who it is that you take guidance from. And then also think on the other end, is always the inverse is important, is who are you mentoring? We ought to, in as much as we take, we should also give. And so those who we mentor. So there are four types among those who sit before the sages. They are likened to a sponge, a funnel, a strainer, and a sifter. A sponge. What does a sponge mean? A sponge which absorbs everything. We've all met those kinds of people when we're mentoring or when we're teaching or when we're working with people, whether that's students, children, whatever it is. These are people who we um, uh, uh, really see. They just take it in. And I've had people in my life where that I'm a mentee, and I just kind of soak up everything they say. I'm not really fighting anything. I'm not really arguing with them. I just take it in, and even if I disagree, it's just I'm taking it in. Because I value what they are saying. Value meaning just like it has some kind of worth to me. And so we've all been in that situation. A funnel which takes in from one end. I'm sorry. This is the sponge which absorbs everything, just takes it in. A funnel which takes in from one end and spills out from the other. So we take it in, and you can read this a couple of different ways, but you know. I kind of look at it that it's partially like the funnel is, you take in everything, but you're only putting out just a little bit, right? So there's almost a little bit of a, I think it's important that everything we learn we should pass on, right? And one of my biggest challenges is that in my life is that I often forget that the things that I picked up along the way that were aha moments for me or that were moments of clarity, other people may not have experienced it, and that I just assume that everyone has experienced it, and that maybe that's something that I don't pass on. And that's happened quite a bit, at least in my Jewish learning, is that, sometimes. Something Jewish, or even let's take, for example, this Pirkei Avot. Some of this I've studied for a very long time, and it's been very clear to me. And that's not to say that everyone has experienced it. And sometimes we forget that. So when I'm the funnel, I take in all this stuff, but I'm not pushing everything out. I'm not giving out everything. I give out select stuff. And who am I to choose what it is that I'm going to give to somebody else? So it's an important thing to know that what I think everyone knows, maybe that everyone doesn't know. And that's true for you as well. So it's upon us to make sure that we're transmitting or giving over what we have. A strainer, which allows the wine. A strainer which allows the wine to flow out and retains the dregs. So here's the thing: is that we're able to filter out what the dregs. I like that. That you can filter out what is meaningful and what's not meaningful, right? That we learn all sorts of stuff in this, and we're in a day and age, in today's day and age. Certainly, we hear about fake news, and we hear about all sorts of different limitations, I should say, of our certain media, and the conflation of the conflating, I should say, of social media and media, and people taking in things that aren't necessarily true. How do we, as people, as mentees, as students, as people who live in this world, how are we able to decipher what is true and what is not true? And sometimes it can be very, very difficult. And in fact, it takes quite a bit of energy and quite a bit of time to get down to the root of where it is. Where do we go for our information? How do we get our information? We live in a world in which there is access at our fingertips to just about everything we want. And how do we know what is real? What is not real? And I think more than ever, this is really an important thing for us to be that strainer, to really see and be able to distinguish, discern between what is and what is real, what and how do we kind of judge through our lenses what is valid and what is not, and what is opinion and what is fact. And it's very, very challenging. So this is but this is not something new to us. I think it's just happening in a much quicker and more robust way. But this is always what has been, is that people have had to distinguish between wine and the dregs. Okay, and a sifter, which allows the flour to pass through and retains the fine flour. And then there's another element to this is that what about the higher learning? What about the nuance? We live in a day and age as well where we're down to the 3 minute read. It's just like, and if something takes longer than a few minutes for me to read, we'll just move on. Anyone been on any social media? And if anyone posts anything that's longer than a couple of sentences, your chances of people actually reading it are very, very, very low. So people are looking for the quick 1 to 3 minute read, and if anything's, books, that's for another forum. So we need to get our information quickly, and this is referring to, and I'm sure this has happened for millennia, for years, for thousands of years, is that being able to decipher the finer points, nuances. Just look at our tax code. A few years back, I got really into looking at new ways. And I know it sounds very boring. I got into new ways in which to. I got into a couple of books that were talking about our tax code and different ways in which people are taxed and the history of tax. It actually was very interesting. And I can't believe I just shared that with you guys. It's a little embarrassing, but in any event, um, it was really complex stuff, and it's just not as simple as one would hope. And there are just so many nuances and so many different aspects to taxes in the United States. And one of the things is how do we decipher and how do we discern the simplest way to move forward that would make sense for everything? And they looked at different countries and how they do that. But this to me is reminding me which allows the flour to pass through and retains the fine flour is that we have to get rid of some of the more bulky parts, and let's look at the finer points so that we can get a better understanding. So, okay, so just some thoughts on that, and and then we're going to end with this. This was something that we actually studied a few weeks back in a class on love when we had Tisha B'Av. We talked about sinat chinam and baseless hatred, and how baseless hatred is really the cause of all destruction in the world. Anything that's very destructive in this world comes from just hate. But lack of love, indifference, the inability to see the other as a human being, that kind of stuff is very, very destructive. But then a week later, we started discussing a little bit about love and what is love, and how powerful love is. And Pirkei Avot in this week's what we're studying this week in chapter 5, Mishnah 15, hits it hits it right on the head, on the nail, right on the head. I think when love is dependent upon a specific consideration, when that consideration vanishes, the love ceases. So, in other words, when love is depending on something, right? That it depends on you. You do this for me, and then I will love you. You show up here. You fulfill a need in me, right? That you fulfill some kind of almost like this codependency piece, right? That I I am getting something. If that kind of interaction or relationship is there, it's very easy for that love to cease, because when that goes away, what are you left with? You're left with bitterness. You're left with anger. You're left without love. You're confused. You're hurt. And if by contrast it is not dependent upon a specific consideration, it will never cease. In other words, at least the way the Mishnah is reading is that if it's not a love that is based in anything, that it is just a love, a true love, it will never cease. And they're going to give us examples, and these are very specific examples. Which is the love that it is dependent upon a specific thing? The love of Amnon and Tamar. And that comes out of Shmuel 2 in the Nevi'im, in the prophets. And if you recall, the story about Amnon and Tamar is that in short, he was very lustful. He wanted this relationship. It was dependent upon his lust getting satisfied. And certainly we've all had that pull. Certainly we've all been just very extremely emotional. And when we are able to satisfy that need, where are we left with? And take that for any. It's almost like I said, the codependence thing is that when you have this strong desire for something, and it's not just necessarily about a person, but it could be really anything. You have a very very strong desire, and then you finally get it. Uh, um, what are you left with? That all of that anticipation and all that control and all that fantasy and all that, and then what are you left with? In fact, even speaking from a chemical level, is that we've engaged in a part of our brain that the endorphins set in, and a whole bunch of other things, and we become actually hooked on that. Speak to anyone who's been obsessed about anything. You become so obsessed, you become more focused on the obsession than the actual thing of the object of the obsession. That becomes almost more engaging. Talk to anyone that has had anger issues, right? The anger is a place in which to get power. The anger is a place in which to be able to develop a sense of control, and that the anger itself is the thing, not the actual catalyst for the anger. And so once that's removed, you're left with you, like all things. And certainly that's not love that we're talking about. It may feel, right, love being a strong emotion, it may feel as though that's what it is, but once we've become hooked on that, and that thing is removed, we're just left with who we are as people. But let's look at what, and one that is not dependent on a specific thing, the love of David and Jonathan. And this was a love that there was no we could look at the stories, but what's really important is that, and this is just my opinion, that this wasn't based on anything that the other person was giving. This was just based on the human connection, the ability to have a partner, the ability to have somebody to share with. That's what they're talking about, and that it really is an example to uphold, that the relationship isn't dependent on anything other than, right, the other person, being there, being the being of the other person. And in other words, much of what love is the expectations that we put on other people. And quite frankly, when we look at it through our own lens, our own needs, our own desires, nobody can ever truly live up to that. What we have to have is a much more realistic understanding of what love is. And I think this points out is that how, just the inverse of this is, what kind of love do we want? And that's the real question. What kind of love do we want? And do we want an everlasting love, a love that is eternal? I guess that maybe that's a little too long, but or one that is dependent on something that may or may not be there, and then it's just bouncing up and down, almost like a love of a high school love of some sort, right? That there's it's up and down, or volatile, or codependency. But when we look at a love like David and Jonathan, it's not based in anything other than the ability to share our love, and allow others to be with us. And that to me is a mature love, and that can apply to anything. Really accepting people for who they are, accepting situations for who they are, what they are, and in our life. And like I was saying, the inverse is how can I, and this is the question I'll leave us with today, is how can I create relationships in which people don't have to have expectations, or that people don't have to look at me as though there is some kind of expectation that they must fulfill for my love. In other words, do I put out true love? Do I put out an individual who is loving, caring, and tolerant? Or do I put out that My affection and love is dependent on certain things, and some of the most basic stuff is around, let's say, reaching out. Let's reach out to others as opposed to asking the question, why hasn't somebody reached out to me? Okay, have a great day.